Welcome viewers, YouTube channel Lex Consilium Foundation, and I'm Major General Neelendra Kumar in the playlist in Similia, and our guest today is Senior Advocate Sudhish Pai. He is well known on this channel. Sudhish Pai is a Senior Advocate practicing in Karnataka High Court. Apart from being a very astute practitioner of law, he is also known as a legal historian and a legal author. His book, Legends in Law, I don't think any lawyer has not heard of him or is not keeping a copy of it in the library. He has appeared before us a number of times in this channel, and apart from talking about the legal luminaries, he has also at a number of times spoken about the pressing, engaging legal issues. So welcome Sudhishji, and today my first question to you is that we have two lawyers or the judges at the High Court and above from two streams. One is those who come from the district judiciary, and other is the category of practicing lawyers who have meet the criteria as indicated in the Constitution for appointment of judges. With these two streams, what usually happens is that induction of judges at the district level, this is being undertaken, being discharged, it's the authority of the high courts, and they hold examinations, interviews, etc., and the candidates selected are assigned a place in the district judiciary and they're posted. And most of the states have a State Judicial Academy. I'd like to tell you about that. And we have also in the past interviewed, you would have heard Professor Balram Gupta and Professor B.T. Kaul. The second category is of the lawyers. Now the difficulty is that those lawyers who have practiced at high courts for the requisite number of years or perhaps little more, they are busy in making a name position for themselves as a lawyer of repute. And that happens when they look after the cases. They take up the cases of their clients one way or the other, and to the best of their ability, they try and prosecute the interest of their clients. Therefore, in those years, they are not acting as judges in any significant way. The second category is those lawyers who have come from district court. Well, they are well versed in CPC and CRPC when they come to the High Court, but they have really not applied their mind to the Constitution. And also, given the fact that these State Judicial Academy do not have a uniform syllabi, each state has its own curriculum which is taken up and which is impacted. There is some attachment. There are visits to the prison, there are visits to the State Human Rights Commission or the remand homes, etc. So the system varies from state to state. Now with this background, I would request Mr. Sudhish Pai to articulate his views, his impression, and also his suggestion what needs to be done, so that a criticism that our judges are untrained, well, that is not quite palatable, and that should not continue. All yours, sir.
Thank you. Training for judges at all levels. I think yes and no. Let me just try to elaborate. For every lawyer and every judge, education never stops, learning never stops. I recall what the Venerable Jamshedji Kanga, Palkiwala's senior Sirwai, at the age of 90 plus would say, I'm still learning the law. So that is the approach and attitude which should inform every person in every field, all the more in the field of law, be you a judge or a lawyer.
Permit me, Sudhesh, just interject. Please. Here the issue is not the knowledge of law. Here we are talking about competence to be a judge.
Okay.
Now the two things, and you have said that advocacy and lawyering are different. But here we are talking about being a judge.
Yes, I'll just come to that in a minute. It's true that a good lawyer or a good advocate need not necessarily be a good judge. You said that. I have also shared that view Though, of course, nothing is universal. And it is difficult to give you training to make you a judge in that sense. That's my understanding. It is something that one has to cultivate oneself. It is like saying you have to be impartial, you have to be objective, you have to be fair minded. I don't think any training makes you that. Perhaps, your exposure to different views, your exposure to men who have been that does help. But ultimately, it is something that has to be inculcated and cultivated within oneself. Having said that, the training in the knowledge of law is also important. We can't forget that. No one can claim to know that he knows everything. And so it's an ever expanding field. And at the primary, at the first level, entry level of, civil judges and district judges, there is rigorous training, as you mentioned, in the state judicial academies, which is broadly quite all right. Of course, the syllabus varies from state to state, but broadly they touch upon what is important. There is no such training for judges of the High Court and judges of the Supreme Court. This appears to be the uniform pattern not only in India but even in the US and the UK. In the United Kingdom, you have a judicial college where judges of the lower rank, whatever you name them there, are trained rigorously. Judges of the higher judiciary, that's the High Court and the Court of Appeal, are also attend seminar programs in the college. It is more or less the same in the United States, where they call it the National Judicial College. In India, as you said, for the entry level, the civil judges and the district judges, of course, civil judges also get promoted as district judges. You also have direct recruitment to district judges. And for both these categories, there is, if one may say so, quite a comprehensive training program at the state judicial academies. These judges are also called to the National Judicial Academy, Bhopal, where I also happen to be a resource person sometimes, and they are also given exposure to different fields of law at the National Judicial Academy. Particularly, you mentioned about district judges coming to the High Court. They would be generally well equipped in the civil and criminal law, but not in public law. There are programs in the National Judicial Academy, particularly for those very senior district judges. Of course, they don't name it that way because it becomes very embarrassing, who are on the verge of being elevated as High Court judges. They don't call it that, but the whole purpose of the program is that you're, very senior in the cadre of district judges, and you're likely to be taken as High Court judges. These judges are called to the National Judicial Academy at Bhopal, and they have special programs, those judges, which includes, of course, I wouldn't call it training, I would call it only, interaction and exposure to subjects in constitutional law. Having said that, I would just give you two brilliant examples. Of course, they are old timers and we live in a different age today. You had Justice T.L. Venkatramaiah, who was in the Supreme Court from 1951 or 52 to 1958. One of our greatest judges whose portrait adorns the walls of the Court Hall number 2 in the Supreme. He was out and out a pure civil lawyer, top class civil lawyer in his lawyering days. His exposure to public law, constitutional law was virtually nil. When he was elevated to the High Court, he got elevated only at a late age. He came to the High Court only at the age of 58, but still he accepted because he was for more number of years in the Supreme Court than in the High Court. And he took lessons in constitutional law. He was Sir Aladi Krishnaswamy's junior, and therefore he contacted his senior, asked him what books he should read, took lessons from him, and as we all know, turned out to be a very outstanding judge even in public law. And as he came to the Supreme Court, we have a series of his judgments which are simply outstanding. Another example is Justice J.C. Shah, who rose to be the Chief Justice of India. Again, as a lawyer, he was a pure civil lawyer, but he turned out to be one of our greatest tax judges, apart from other fields. And when he retired from the Supreme Court, he was in the Supreme Court, he sat on the tax bench for a long time. And when he retired from the Supreme Court, not a single income tax reference was pending. He had cleared all the... I'm only mentioning this, this is not an answer to the questions that you have posed. This is how, if I may venture to say this, if you pick up the right people, they would shape themselves well, even if they may not have complete knowledge in every field. The problem is, if I may say so, in today's setting with the initial choice, is that good? It is very difficult to say yes. While I would not universalize, we still have good judges. And all this, I venture to say, I have said this, I have written about this, I miss no occasion to say this, no offense or disrespect. All this is after 1993, the second judge's case, and the monster of the collegium that the Supreme Court created without any sanction in the constitution or the law. What happens is, I think we all know, we don't talk about it, but it is too well known today. Appointments happen not necessarily for the best of reasons. Appointments happen for various reasons. It's almost sometimes I scratch your back, you scratch mine. Each one has a candidate for himself. The government has their own candidates. And then ultimately you have a court, which is perhaps not the best of persons eligible or fit to be there. Having said that, there is some kind of a training may be necessary, but it's very difficult again. See, it's difficult to call a lawyer and say, I will now train you to be a judge. These are things that have to be, you sit and a process of osmosis, you absorb many things, you watch. Even as a good lawyer, pardon me for this, of course, as a lawyer, you would only be arguing your case, fine. But then if you're a good lawyer, you don't miss the nuances of how judging takes place. Because you watch that. Of course, your role here, standing this side, is to uphold, to promote your client's case to the best of your ability within the parameters of the law and ethics. But still, that's why even we comment on a judge. Lawyers do comment on a judge whether he's doing his job well, because we know what is expected. Therefore, when a lawyer takes a seat on the bench, broadly, we expect that he would remember these things and turn out to act in that manner. I do admit it does not happen always, and I have no answer for that as to why it does not and how it can be remedied. Why it does not, I think the answer is very simple. What Ambedkar said about the constitution, you may have a good constitution, but it will still not work if man is wild. These are the words you and I remember that he used in the Constituent Assembly. That applies with equal force to every field of activity. And therefore, the best judges have to be essentially the best of men. You know the famous saying of a Lord Chancellor as to what are the qualifications for a judge. He said he must first be a gentleman. If he knows a little law, it's all right. He can always pick it up. So, it's very difficult to define these things, but ultimately, this is the broad framework within which we have to function. Continuing education, of course, is a must. National Judicial Academy does good work. Whether it is sufficient is another thing. And these were not there some decades ago. As you know, there was no such program, there were no such institutions. Today, you have state academies in every state, and you have the National Judicial Academy at Bhopal for the entire country, which caters to, I wouldn't call it training, but it caters to the needs of continuing legal education for High Court judges. They have, on different topics, regular programs. Supreme Court judges don't have it, not that they are beyond the need for training. Let us be very clear about that. They have what they call retreats once in a week. That's not a regular thing, where they all meet, discuss, call some experts in various fields, even outside law, have interactions. So this is broadly the picture.
But in the end, I'll just leave some points for consideration, and perhaps we would have further talk on this. Number one, that the days of Sir Gurudas Banerjee and Shah Suleiman, etc., it doesn't exist now. You have written that lawyering and advocacy are entirely two different things, and you brought out, say, in the case of Muhammad Ali Jinnah.
Yes.
So therefore, a lawyer may not be a very good advocate, vice versa, and there are those who excel in both. Thirdly, a judge's work is not to be sort of trivialized. To be a judge is entirely a different cup of tea. The point to be noted are two. Number one, that it was agreed, and at some stage the National Judicial Academy and the State Judicial Academies, their need was felt and they were set up. Now the only point to be seen in that light is that these academies that have been set up, are they delivering, are they performing to the best the expectations from them, or there is some scope for improvement, redesigning, redirecting them, reorienting them, and if so, in which direction? Well, your views are heard.
Judging is a sacred job. It's entirely different from being an advocate.
Because we have not gone into the further attributes of a judgeship. You see, the
Yes.
management of the court staff, the management of the bar, writing of a judgment. These
Yes.
things, a lawyer in his 20 years of practice, he has not been called upon to do
But
this and to
true.
expect that a
True,
good.
true, true. But let me just differ from you for a moment. A good lawyer can write a good judgment without any difficulty. Let me promise you that. Let me assert it. If you fail as a judge to write a good judgment, it only proves you're a very poor lawyer also. I say that with all emphasis and authority at my command. A good lawyer can write a good judgment as well as any judge under the sun. If a judge does not do that, it only shows he is a poor lawyer. I have no doubt about that. Of course, it always
Yes.
grows, and by
Yes.
experience, you learn and do it better. I have no doubt about that. But to say that the moment you change over from the crossover from the bar to the bench, you can't try. You know, you can. We will write judgments. We can write better judgments than what Supreme Court judges write. I'm saying this with all humility, but all emphasis.
Okay.
I have not the slightest doubt, and many lawyers can. Why I'm saying this again is ultimately it is your own quality, and it is very difficult to inculcate that in you from an outside source. I don't think any training can make you, when you write judgments at the district court level, yes, they have training. I don't think a Supreme Court judge can be trained to write a judgment. He has to inculcate it himself and grow. And there's a world of difference. A good High Court judge may be a hopeless Supreme Court judge because the vision and the mission are totally different. So at each stage, it differs. And Frankfurter made a very significant remark. I don't know whether we can say it is 100% true. He said, the ropes that a judge wears changes the man within.
Right.
I'm not very sure.
Well
but
said. Yes.
said by so eminent a judge as Frankfurt. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.